Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint Blood Spatter. If you'd like to support the channel, our Ko-fi and Patreon pages are linked below. Now onto the video. So first I'm just going to show you roughly what some of the Blood Spatter looks like in pencil, and then I'm going to paint them and then show you on a miniature. So this first one, which is slightly out of focus and now in focus, is kind of like what a blood splat would look like when you first drop one from a vertical position. So it'd land on the floor, you'd have little spatters of blood around it, little lines of blood coming from it. This one here is just, I'm going to do a rough, what it looks like when a hand is dragged with blood on it, so maybe a hand on a wall or on armour. So you'd have those fingers, the thumb, and then you'd have the kind of smears from where the palm of the hand has been spread. As I say, these are very rough. I'm not a blood spatter analyst, so this is just kind of what I've seen, what I've read. Then you have like high velocity spatter, so if someone is being shot, you get the blood spatter backwards. So when your Marines or what have you have got their gun pointing out and they're shooting, they will be getting smaller amounts of spatter coming back to them. You'd also have blood drops that have hit at an angle. So if it's hit maybe the side of a pauldron or something like that, it is going to have a big area of impact. Then it is going to run down with a little trickle, and it'll have darker or thicker blood at the bottom of that initial impact area. And that little trickle will also be as dark. Also the same thing for the little dots of spatter here. I'm just going to do little spots like that. But also you're going to get little spread out sections where you'll have a small impact like the bigger one to the right, and it'll have a little tail on it, like so. And that'll be sort of maybe on the wrist or on the hand where the blood has come back from, as you'll see a bit later, the bolt pistol that the World Eater is firing, so he's going to have that spatter coming back. So impacts of straight on spatter or vertical spatter, like the one above there, would likely be more of a round dot with little bits coming off it. Here we're looking at the hands, so you've got the fingers being dragged. So those 4 fingers and the thumb. See the thumb slightly set back. Now you're just going to kind of have smears if it's been dragged, so no need to be too accurate with that. Just kind of smudge it in, like so. Then for these ones, what I've tended to be doing is getting a little blob of the paint on the end of the brush, kind of pressing the brush down and slightly forwards towards the point, which is what I always say don't do. And then when you lift that off, that will give you a blood drop where the top of the drop is thinner, so it's a lighter colour, and the bottom of the drop is darker. You can then just paint on that little tail. So here I'm doing kind of arterial spray. So if they're cutting through people and wading through their enemies, there's going to be jets of crimson going all over the show. So you kind of want to have that almost like fountain effect of the initial jet in an arc. Obviously you want that to be a bit smoother than that, that's paint on paper for you. And then you'll have little trickles where parts of it either aren't going as fast or are slowing down and falling quicker. And so you'll have those little tails coming down. You'd also, depending on how fresh it is, you'd have runs coming from that jet too. So where the blood would be thickest, or if it's splattered on thickly in a certain area, you would have little trails of blood running from that area down the surface. Also do small arcs like that as well, because you will be getting smaller jets. As the power goes from them, they will get shorter and shorter. And also depending on where the person is standing and what is between them and the spray, you'd have smaller kind of crescents there too. Okay, so here you can see some of the initial splats, like I was saying, the high velocity stuff, where you'd have like the little dots and you'd have bits coming back from the wrist. Now in reality these are really tiny, but you've got like the arcs as well from the arterial sprays going on. You have runs going down the side. Some of these runs I've done by doing a splat of blood and then a trail down. You can see some of these on the legs, like on the back here. And you have more of the arterial stuff going across the chest there too, where you've got the patterns. It's going to run funny. You'd have runs going down now after the weapon and that kind of thing too. Obviously depending on how long they've been fighting and who they've been butchering, you'd have more or less on them. So for this, all that I've used is Blood for the Blood God. I'm going to start doing that high velocity stuff of just doing tiny little spots of Blood for the Blood God onto the armour. So this is all going on the front of the armour and the area where it will be coming back from if he's just popped a bolt round into someone. As I say, in reality these would be tiny little specks. They're obviously going to be a little bit larger, or quite a bit larger on the miniature, because the miniature is obviously a lot smaller. I'm doing little runs here. Because it's a bolt shell and they explode, you're probably going to get more coming out as well. So just kind of painting on these little runs from where it's hit the edge of that cuff and run down the side of it. The one place where I haven't put too much spatter on is the bolt pistol itself. Little bits will go on there towards the end, but not too much initially. So also thinking about the miniature itself when he's shooting, unless he's running along forward with the arm outstretched the whole time, he's going to have that same kind of spatter going on different parts, like what is the top of the pauldron at the minute, but it's actually the front, and also the top or front of that upper arm armour piece too. Battle plate that kind of covers the tricep and bicep area. So we're just going to continue adding this little spots of blood and little runs where it's caught the armour at an angle. If you want to do some bigger splats like the ones where you're pressing the brush forward, I'll be showing you exactly how I do those in a moment, but I'll do a few here as well. Okay, so we've done the dots of spatter. Now we're going to do some arterial type spray. So thinking about these in a kind of curving arc, how it land on the armour. You'd be going into those corners, but as it's going down the armour, you'd also have gaps where the spray wouldn't have gone. If there's an overhang like this gold circle on the chest piece there, you'd have a little bit underneath there where it wouldn't have reached that grill. The same just below that chest piece as well, you'd have a gap where it's going down those tubes and onto that leg armour. Also think about his position as well. He's not going to be static in this position when he's moving, so you would get stuff being smeared, and also the pattern maybe wouldn't go down and onto his leg there. If his leg was back, it might just be on the top of the knee plate, or if his leg was forward, it might be more along the length of that piece of armour. Also depending on which way the helm was facing when those arcs of red have come over. Would depend on where these lines go as well. But even if you're not really thinking of it that way and you're just putting on some lines and putting on the arcs of red, it does break it up and it makes it that little bit nicer and that little bit more thought out and patterned, rather than sponging it on or brushing it on too thickly. I think if I was doing a miniature where there was a lot more spatter on them, I would probably build it up in layers like I'm doing here, just so that you could see all the different kinds and all the different layers of it and all the different streaks and splats and that kind of thing, just so that it gave it that natural look to it. It wasn't just painted on en masse. I was also trying to think about what weapons he had here as well. With chainsword, I probably would do a lot more splattering on them, because they would be carving through stuff and it'd make a horrific mess. With the power axe, not so much, because I'd be expecting that to maybe cauterize the wounds or not cause as much butchery. I wouldn't be carving up the enemies or anything like that, I'd just be slicing through them. Here you can see him doing a little arc of crimson across the shoulder pad there too. In similar style to the Flesh Tearer's Marine as well, you'll see little bits of blood spatter on that one too, across his face and his armour. So now we've moved on to the axe head, and the axe and the hand that's carrying it. I'm going to be doing a lot more runs here, because it's a little bit more up close and personal, using this kind of weapon than firing a bolt into someone. So I'd expect him to have plenty around his hands and run down the handle of that axe. As I say, I am by no means an expert on this. This is just from reading a few articles and looking at a few pictures and then working out how I would put it onto the miniature. As I say, if this is a chainsword, I would expect it to be an almost red hand holding the chainsword. So we're painting on some bigger splats here with the runs coming down from them. Trying to think about where that blood would collect on the emblem on the chest there. Where you've got those arrows and ridges, you're going to get blood collecting in those, as well as, depending on the size of the splatter, how big that would run down from it, or how much that would run down from it rather. Doing a little bit less into those shoulder areas because they would be covered more by the arms, depending on the position of the arm and the pauldrons. So they'd probably get a little bit less. While the chest area would get a lot more because there's nothing going to be in front of that too often. So here I'm putting some on the power axe, and that'd probably be from the spray coming out of the enemies as they're cleaved by the axe blade. I'm putting a slight bit of blood on the bottom of the axe head there, because I'm pretty sure that wouldn't be cleaving as much. Maybe the power field isn't as powerful on that part. It's all just speculation obviously, but I put a little tiny bit of blood on the very bottom tip of that axe because I think the power field would probably burn off most of the blood. So here we're doing some of those blood runs. We're doing the initial splat, and then a tail running down from it, like so. Probably badly positioned, that one, because it's right underneath the pouch, so it probably needs to be more of an angle coming from the front or the side. Doing a few more runs like that on the miniature. You can see me doing some of those little splots with the thicker bit of the drip too. And that is the finished efforts on Blood Spatter. Happy with how it turned out. I like the arcs and some of the splatter effects on there, but it looks good without being too much. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media, linked below. Thanks very much. If you like the channel and you enjoy the content and you'd like to support us, our Coffee and Patreon pages are linked below. Thanks very much.